Hey horror fans, before we venture into the wild, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment with your city and what time you're watching. This helps YouTube bring you more spine-chilling tales like these. Tonight, we're diving into 9 true wilderness horror stories, pulled from the darkest corners of Reddit, where hikers, campers, and hunters face terrors that lurk in the shadows. From whispering pines to vanishing cabins, these stories will make you rethink your next trip into the wild. So grab a blanket, turn off the lights, and let's get started. Because something's out there, and it's closer than you think.
First story, The Whispering Pines. In the summer of 2023, a Reddit user named Sarah, known online as Trailblazer92, shared a story that sent shivers through the hiking community. It's the kind of tale that makes you question what's really out there in the wild, where the trees stand silent and the shadows seem to watch. This is her account, pieced together from her post and the chilling details she later shared in comments, of a night in the Pacific Northwest that she never forget. Sarah was an experienced hiker, the kind who thrived on solo adventures. She'd tackled trails from the Appalachians to the Rockies, but the dense forests of Washington's Olympic Peninsula called to her like no other. She planned a 3-day trek through a remote section of the Olympic National Forest, far from the usual tourist paths. Her destination was a secluded grove of ancient pine trees, rumored to be untouched for centuries. Locals called it the Whispering Pines, though Sarah didn't know why at the time. She figured it was just a poetic name for a beautiful spot. On the first day, Sarah hiked 12 miles through misty trails, the air thick with the scent of pine and damp earth. The forest was eerily quiet, no birds, no rustling animals, just the crunch of her boots on the path. By late afternoon, she reached the grove, a circle of towering pines, their needles so dense they blocked out most of the sunlight. The ground was carpeted with soft moss, and the air felt heavy, like it was holding its breath. Sarah set up her one-person tent in a small clearing, built a fire, and settled in for the night. She felt a strange unease, but brushed it off as exhaustion. As midnight approached, Sarah woke with a start. Her tent was pitch black, the fire long burned out. She lay still, heart pounding, trying to pinpoint what had roused her. Then she heard it, whispers, not human voices, but low, guttural sounds, like wind moving through vocal cords that weren't there. They seemed to come from every direction, circling her tent, rising and falling in a rhythm that felt alive. It was like the trees were talking to each other, she later wrote, but not in any language I could understand. Sarah grabbed her phone, hoping to record the sounds as proof. The battery was at 80%, but the moment she hit record, the screen flickered and died. She fumbled for her flashlight, her hands shaking, but its beam barely pierced the darkness. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, weaving through the pines like a chant. She unzipped her tent a fraction, peering out, but saw nothing, just the looming shapes of the trees against the starless sky. The air was colder now, unnaturally so, and her breath fogged, despite the summer heat. Terrified but curious, Sarah stayed awake, clutching her knife, listening as the whispers continued for hours. They stopped abruptly just before dawn, replaced by an oppressive silence. When sunlight finally filtered through the canopy, Sarah crawled out of her tent, expecting to find nothing unusual. Instead, she froze. Surrounding her tent was a perfect spiral of pine cones, hundreds of them, arranged with precision across the moss. Each one was upright, their tips pointing inward toward her tent like a target. She hadn't heard a single sound of movement all night. Sarah took photos, her hands trembling as she used her backup battery pack to revive her phone. The images were clear. The spiral was flawless, stretching 20 feet across, with no footprints or signs of disturbance. In the moss, She packed up immediately, abandoning her plans to stay another night. As she hiked out, she felt eyes on her back, though she never saw anyone nor anything. The forest remained silent, but the weight of being watched never left her. Back in town, Sarah shared her story at a local diner, hoping for answers. The waitress, an older woman with deep lines in her face, went pale. She said the Whispering Pines wasn't just a name. Old stories claimed the grove was a thin place, where the veil between worlds was weak. Loggers in the 1800s avoided it, saying the trees spoke to those who lingered too long. Some who camped there never returned, and those who did spoke of strange shapes in the mist, or pine cones arranged in unnatural patterns. The waitress warned Sarah not to share her photos online, saying, "Whatever's out there doesn't like to be seen." Sarah posted her story anyway, along with one blurry photo of the Pinnacone spiral. The others, she claimed, had vanished from her phone. Commenters on Reddit were divided. Some called it a prank, others a hallucination from dehydration or fear. But a few locals chimed in, sharing similar stories. Whispers in the night, electronics failing, and perfect spirals of pine cones or stones. One user, claiming to be a park ranger, said the grove was off-limits to staff after dark, though they wouldn't say why. Sarah hasn't returned to the Olympic Peninsula since. She wrote in a follow-up post that she still hears whispers in her dreams sometimes. Faint and guttural, like the forest calling her back. "I don't know what was out there." She ended her post, "But I know it wasn't human, and I know it's still watching me." Second story, The Shadow in the Snowing, January 2024. A Reddit user named Mark, who went by Snowbound Hiker online, posted a chilling account in a hiking subreddit that left readers uneasy. His story, set in the frozen wilderness of Alberta, Canada, has become one of those tales that lingers in your mind, making you question what might be lurking just beyond the snow. Gathered from his original post and follow-up comments, this is the full, unnerving story of what Mark and his friend encountered during a winter hike. A tale that's as haunting as it is inexplicable. Mark was no stranger to the cold. A seasoned outdoorsman from Calgary, he'd spent years exploring Alberta's backcountry, from the Rockies to the remote boreal forests. He and his childhood friend, Liam, planned a weekend cross-country skiing trip in Konanaski's country, a rugged region known for its stunning peaks and brutal winters. They chose a lesser-known trail, one that wound through a valley flanked by dense spruce and pine. Far from the crowded ski resorts, it was a 10-mile loop, manageable for a day trip, with plans to camp overnight if the weather held. The forecast predicted light snow, but nothing they couldn't handle. They packed their gear: skis, poles, a tent, and a satellite phone for emergencies, and set out at dawn. The morning was crisp, the sky a pale gray, and the trail was pristine, blanketed in fresh powder. The valley felt like another world, silent except for the soft crunch of their skis and the occasional groan of a tree under the weight of snow. As they glided deeper into the forest, Mark noticed the air growing heavier, the silence almost oppressive. Liam, usually chatty, was quiet too, focused on the rhythm of their movements. By noon, they were halfway through the loop, and a light blizzard began to roll in, reducing visibility to about 50 feet. They pressed on, confident in their skills and the trail markers they'd memorized. It was around 2 p.m. when Mark first saw it. Through the swirling snow, he caught a glimpse of a tall, thin shadow moving parallel to them, just at the edge of the blizzard's haze. It was humanoid, but unnaturally elongated, its edges blurry, like it was part of the storm itself. Mark stopped, squinting, thinking it might be a trick of the light, or a tree swaying in the wind. "You see that?" he whispered to Liam, who'd paused beside him. Liam nodded, his face pale, his eyes fixed on the same spot. The shadow moved again, matching their pace, but when they turned to face it directly, it vanished into the snow. They didn't speak about it, chalking it up to fatigue or the storm playing tricks. But the unease settled in, and they skied faster, their breaths puffing in the freezing air. The shadow appeared again 20 minutes later, closer this time, maybe 30 feet away. It glided effortlessly, mimicking their movements when they turned left. It turned left. When they stopped, it stopped. Mark's heart raced as he tried to focus on its shape. It was tall, at least 7 feet, with no clear features, just a dark, wavering silhouette. Liam whispered, "What the hell is that?" But neither had an answer. They shouted into the storm, hoping to scare it off. But their voices were swallowed by the wind. The shadow followed them for nearly an hour, always at the edge of their vision, never getting closer, but never falling behind. Mark's mind raced with possibilities: a bear, a person, a hallucination, but nothing fit. Bears didn't move like that, and no human could keep pace in deep snow without skis. The temperature was dropping fast, now well below zero, and their fingers were numb despite their gloves. They decided to cut the loop short, heading for a ranger station they knew was a few miles away. The shadow stayed with them, a constant presence in the blizzard. By 4 p.m., the light was fading, and the storm was worsening. They reached a clearing where the trail widened, and for a moment, the shadow was gone. Relieved, they pushed on, but the relief didn't last. As they neared the ranger station, now abandoned for the winter, Mark glanced back and saw it again, closer than ever, standing motionless at the tree line. Its head, if it had one, seemed tilted, watching them. Liam grabbed Mark's arm, his voice shaking. "It's not moving now. Let's go." They skied hard, reaching the station just as darkness fell. The ranger station was a small, weathered cabin, its windows dark and door locked. They huddled inside their tent nearby, too rattled to build a fire. The storm raged outside, but the shadow didn't reappear. Exhausted, they tried to sleep, taking turns keeping watch. Around midnight, Mark heard something, a faint crunch. In the snow, slow and deliberate, circling their tent. He woke Liam, and they listened, hearts pounding, as the sound moved closer, then stopped. They didn't dare look outside. At dawn, the storm had cleared, leaving a glittering, untouched landscape. Mark and Liam packed up quickly, eager to leave. As they skied back to their car, they checked their tracks from the previous day. What they found stopped them cold. Their ski tracks were clear, weaving through the valley. But alongside them was a third set of tracks, barefoot, human-like, but too large, with toes that looked wrong, almost claw-like. The tracks followed theirs, 4 miles, stopping abruptly at the clearing near the ranger station. There were no tracks leading away. Mark posted about the experience on Reddit, including a shaky photo of the barefoot tracks next to their ski marks, taken with his phone. The post blew up, with hundreds of comments. Some users suggested it was a prank or a rare animal, like a wolverine. But others shared similar stories from Alberta's backcountry, shadows and storms, tracks that appeared from nowhere. One commenter, claiming to be a First Nations elder, said the valley was known to their people as a place where the wind walks, a spirit that follows the living but never reveals itself fully. They advised Mark to burn sage and avoid the area. Mark and Liam haven't gone back to Kananaskis since. In a follow-up post, Mark admitted he still feels watched whenever it snows, especially at night. "I don't know what it was," he wrote, "but it knew we were there, and I think it let us go." The photo of the tracks is still online, buried in the subreddit's archives, a haunting reminder of something that doesn't belong in the snow. Third story: The Vanishing Ranger. In the summer of 2022, a Reddit user named Emma, posting under the handle Campfire Tales 22, shared a story that sent chills through the outdoor community. It was a tale from a camping trip in Yellowstone National Park, a place known for its breathtaking beauty, but also its eerie, untamed vastness. Emma's account, pieced together from her original post and the haunting details she added in comments, describes an encounter that left her and her friends questioning reality. This is the story of the ranger who wasn't there and the unsettling evidence they found the next day. Emma was part of a tight-knit group of 4 friends, her, Jake, Mia, and Tyler, who loved escaping the city for wilderness adventures. They'd planned a week-long camping trip in Yellowstone's backcountry, far from the crowded geysers and tourist trails. Their destination was a remote meadow near the Lamar Valley, accessible only by a strenuous 8-mile hike. The group was well prepared, with tents, food, bear spray, and a satellite GPS for safety. They were thrilled for a week of stargazing, campfire stories, and disconnection from the world. The first day went smoothly. They hiked through pine forests, spotted elk grazing in the distance, and set up camp in a grassy clearing surrounded by towering trees. The air was crisp, the sky clear, and the only sounds were the rustle of leaves and the distant howl of a coyote. On their second evening, as the group sat around a crackling fire roasting marshmallows, a park ranger appeared at the edge of their campsite. He was tall, lanky, with a weathered face and a standard-issue green uniform, complete with a wide-brimmed hat. His name tag read Ranger Tom, and he had a friendly, almost disarming smile. He introduced himself, asking to see their camping permit, which Emma handed over. He glanced at it, nodded, and warned them to stick to marked trails, saying, "The woods get tricky at night. Things move out there you don't want to meet." His tone was calm but firm, and his eyes lingered on the group a moment too long, making Mia shift uncomfortably. He tipped his hat, wished them a safe trip, and walked off into the darkening forest, his flashlight bobbing until it disappeared. The group brushed off the odd vibe, chalking it up to the ranger's long day or their own imaginations. They continued their evening, telling ghost stories and laughing under the stars. But around 1 a.m., they were jolted awake by screams, human-like but raw, echoing from deep in the woods. Flashlights flickered in the distance, darting erratically like someone was running. Jake grabbed his binoculars, but the forest was too dense to see anything clearly. The screams stopped abruptly, replaced by a heavy silence that made the group's skin crawl. They huddled in their tents, bear spray in hand, whispering theories about a lost hiker or an animal attack. No one slept much that night. At dawn, the group packed up, rattled but determined to report the incident. They hiked to a ranger station 5 miles away, a small log cabin staffed by a single ranger, a woman named Claire. Emma described the screams and flashing lights, expecting concern. Instead, Claire's face tightened. "You're sure you heard screams and saw lights?" she asked. When the group nodded, she leaned forward. "We didn't have any rangers patrolling that area last night. No one was on duty after 6 p.m. Emma mentioned Ranger Tom, describing his uniform and the permit check. Claire's expression turned grim. "We don't have a Ranger Tom. No one by that name works in Yellowstone." The group exchanged uneasy glances. Tyler pulled out his phone to show Claire a group selfie they'd taken by the fire, hoping it might jog her memory. As they scrolled through the photos, their blood ran cold. In the background of one image, taken just after the ranger's visit, a figure stood at the edge of the firelight. It was Ranger Tom, his face partially shadowed, staring directly at the camera. None of them remembered him being there when the photo was taken. Mia's hands shook as she zoomed in. The ranger's eyes looked unnaturally dark, almost hollow. Worse, the next photo, taken minutes later, showed the same spot empty. It was as if he'd appeared and vanished without a trace. Claire urged them to send her the photo and file a report, but she warned them not to share it online. "Yellowstone's a big place," she said quietly. "Not everything out here is what it seems." She mentioned old stories from park staff seeing rangers who didn't exist, strange figures in the woods, and screams with no source. Some Native American tribes in the area believed the park was home to spirits that mimicked humans to lure people off trails. The group left the station shaken, their excitement for the trip replaced by dread. Back home, Emma posted the story on Reddit, including the eerie photo of Ranger Tom. The post exploded, with thousands of upvotes and comments. Some users suggested it was a prank or a misidentified hiker, but others shared similar experiences: a ranger who vanished, screams in the night, or photos showing figures no one remembered seeing. One commenter, claiming to be a former Yellowstone employee, said certain trails were quietly avoided by staff after unexplained sightings. They hinted at an unofficial log of ghost ranger incidents, though they offered no proof. Emma and her friends haven't returned to Yellowstone since. In a follow-up post, she wrote that the photo of Ranger Tom disappeared from her phone a week later, despite being backed up to the cloud. She still hears those screams in her dreams sometimes, sharp and desperate, and she swears she sees a man in a ranger hat standing at the edge of her vision when she's alone at night. Don't know who or what he was, she wrote, but he wasn't there to help us. I think he was watching us for something else. Fourth story, the cave that breathes in the fall of 2023. A Reddit user named Ethan, known online as CaverGhost, posted a story that sent ripples through the caving community. It was a detailed account of a solo expedition in the Smoky Mountains of Tennessee, a place known for its rugged beauty, but also its hidden dangers. Ethan's tale, compiled from his original post and the unsettling follow-up comments he shared, describes an encounter in an unmapped cave that left him questioning not just his sanity, but the very nature of the earth itself. This is the story of the cave that seemed to breathe and the chilling presence he found within. Ethan was an experienced caver, having explored dozens of caves across the southeast, from Kentucky's Mammoth Cave to lesser-known fissures in Georgia. He thrived on the thrill of discovering uncharted systems, places where few dared to venture. In September 2023, he set his sights on the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. Drawn by rumors of an unmapped cave system near Cades Cove, a local caver had mentioned it in passing on a forum, describing a narrow entrance hidden behind a boulder, but warned it was bad news without explaining why. Ethan, always chasing the next adventure, saw it as a challenge. He packed his gear: headlamp, ropes, a backup flashlight, a GoPro, and a handheld GPS, and set out alone, telling only his sister his planned route for safety. The hike to the cave was grueling, a 6-mile trek through dense forest and rocky terrain. By mid-afternoon, Ethan found the entrance, a jagged slit in the mountainside, barely wide enough for him to squeeze through, concealed by a moss-covered boulder. The air around it was cool and damp, with a faint, musky odor that reminded him of wet stone and something older, almost primal. He checked his GPS, noted his coordinates, and slipped inside, his headlamp casting a narrow beam into the darkness. The cave was tight at first, a claustrophobic tunnel that forced him to crawl on his belly, but it soon opened into a larger chamber, its walls slick with moisture and etched with faint, irregular scratches. As Ethan ventured deeper, he noticed something strange, a rhythmic breeze, subtle but steady, like the cave was inhaling and exhaling. It wasn't unusual for caves to have air currents, but this felt different to regular, almost alive. He brushed it off, attributing it to a natural draft, and pressed on, mapping the chamber with his notebook. The walls were smooth in places, but as he descended, he found carvings, hundreds of them, crude but deliberate, depicting eyes of all shapes and sizes. Some were human-like, others elongated or slitted, etched so deeply they seemed to catch the light of his headlamp and glow faintly. It was like the cave was watching me, he wrote later, his words tinged with unease. About 200 feet in, the passage narrowed again, sloping downward into a low chamber, where the air grew colder and the breeze stronger. Ethan's headlamp flickered, a rare occurrence for his reliable gear, and he switched to his backup flashlight. That's when he heard it, a low moan, deep and resonant, vibrating through the stone. It wasn't wind, felt intentional, like a voice from the earth itself. His GoPro, recording the whole time, picked up the sound, a guttural hum that made his stomach churn. He froze, scanning the chamber, but saw only shadows and those eerie, glowing eye carvings. The moan came again, louder, and the breeze pulsed. In time with it, brushing against his face like a cold breath. Panic set in, but Ethan forced himself to stay calm. He marked his path with chalk, a caver's habit, and decided to turn back. But as he retraced his steps, his GPS started glitching, its screen flashing random coordinates that placed him miles away, then deep underground. The chalk marks he'd left were gone, replaced by fresh eye carvings that hadn't been there before. The tunnel seemed to shift, leading him in circles, despite his careful navigation. Hours passed far longer than his descent should have taken. His flashlight dimmed, and the moan grew louder, now accompanied by a faint scratching, like nails on stone, coming from behind the walls. Desperate, Ethan shouted, hoping his voice might scare off whatever was there. The sound echoed, but the scratching stopped, replaced by silence so heavy it felt like a weight on his chest. He stumbled through the dark, his headlamp now dead, using his hands to feel along the walls. The carvings were everywhere now, rough under his fingers, and some felt warm, almost pulsing. At last, he saw a faint glow ahead the cave's entrance. He crawled out, gasping, as the sun set over the Smokies. His watch showed he'd been inside for nearly 10 hours, though it felt like only 2. Back in town, Ethan shared his story at a local bar, his hands still trembling. The bartender, an older man with deep-set eyes, listened quietly before saying the cave was known to locals as the Breathing Hollow. He claimed it was avoided by hikers and cavers alike, tied to old Cherokee stories of a spirit that lived in the mountain, luring intruders to trap them forever. Those who escaped, he said, were chosen to leave, but never returned unchanged. Ethan checked his GoPro footage later, hoping for proof. The video showed the eye carvings and captured the moan, but the last 30 minutes were corrupted, filled with static and fleeting glimpses of a shadowy figure with too many eyes. Ethan posted his story on Reddit, along with a still from the GoPro, showing the glowing carvings. The post gained traction, with cavers debating whether it was a hallucination from low oxygen or something more sinister. A few locals commented, sharing tales of missing hikers near Cades Cove and strange sounds in the mountains. One user, claiming to be a park employee, said the cave wasn't on any official maps and was quietly monitored after a string of disappearances in the 1980s. They urged Ethan to delete the post, warning that some things don't like being found. Ethan hasn't caved since. In a follow-up comment, he admitted he still feels the cave's breeze in his nightmares, a cold breath that carries that same guttural moan. "I don't know what was down there," he wrote, "but it knew I was there, and I think it's still waiting for me to come back." Fifth story: the lake's reflection in the summer of 2024. A Reddit user named Jenna, posting under the handle Paddle Wanderer, shared a story that left the kayaking community rattled. It was a chilling account of a solo night paddle on a remote lake in Minnesota's Boundary Waters canoe area, a wilderness known for its pristine waters and eerie silence. Jenna's tale, pieced together from her original post and the haunting details she added in follow-up comments, describes an encounter that turned a peaceful paddle into a nightmare. This is the story of a reflection that wasn't hers, and the unsettling evidence she found the next day. Jenna was an avid kayaker, drawn to the solitude of Minnesota's northern lakes. She'd spent years exploring the Boundary Waters, a vast network of lakes and forests near the Canadian border, where cell service was non-existent and the stars felt close enough to touch. In July 2024, she planned a solo overnight trip on a small, unnamed lake deep in the wilderness, reachable only by a 5-mile portage. It was a spot she'd heard about from a local outfitter, who described it as quiet, but strange, with no explanation. Jenna packed her lightweight kayak, a tent, a waterproof camera, and enough supplies for 2 days. Eager for a night of paddling under the moon, the journey to the lake was uneventful but exhausting. Jenna portaged through dense pine forests, the air thick with the scent of sap and moss. By late afternoon, she reached the lake, a glassy, oval-shaped body of water, surrounded by towering trees and rocky shores. The surface was so still, it mirrored the sky perfectly, reflecting clouds and the occasional hawk circling above. Jenna set up her tent on a small beach, ate a quick dinner, and decided to paddle out as the sun set, hoping to capture the Milky Way's reflection with her camera. The lake was silent, save for the gentle lap of water against her kayak and the distant call of a loon. As darkness fell, the moon rose, casting a silver glow across the lake. Jenna glided along her paddle, dipping rhythmically, the water so clear she could see fish darting below. Around 10 p.m., she paused in the center of the lake, letting her kayak drift as she adjusted her camera. That's when she noticed it. Her reflection in the water wasn't right. She leaned over the side, expecting to see her silhouette ponytail, life vest, paddle in hand, but instead, the reflection showed a figure with long, loose hair and a wide, unnatural smile. The eyes were too large, glinting in the moonlight, and they seemed to stare directly at her, unblinking. Jenna froze, her breath catching. She waved her paddle, but the reflection didn't mimic her movement. It just kept smiling, heart pounding. Jenna paddled toward shore, her eyes locked on the water. The reflection followed, gliding beneath her kayak, its smile never wavering. She tried to convince herself it was a trick of the light, maybe a fish or a shadow from the trees, but the figure was too clear, too human-like. As she neared the beach, the reflection suddenly vanished, leaving only her own image in the water. She scrambled ashore, dragging her kayak onto the sand, and shone her flashlight across the lake. The surface was calm, undisturbed, but the air felt heavier, like something was watching from the trees. Jenna crawled into her tent, zipping it tight, and stayed awake all night, listening for any sound. The forest was silent, but she couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. At dawn, Jenna emerged, exhausted and shaken. She checked her kayak, expecting nothing unusual, but stopped cold. The hull was covered in wet handprints, small, almost child-sized, with fingers that seemed too long and webbed at the edges. They weren't there when she'd pulled the kayak ashore. Worse, the sand around her tent was undisturbed, with no footprints or signs of anyone approaching. Her camera, which she'd left on a tripod facing the lake, had taken several photos automatically during the night. When she reviewed them, her blood ran cold. One image showed the lake's surface, and in it, the same smiling figure from her reflection. Standing on the water, its head tilted as if looking at her tent, Jenna packed up and left immediately, portaging back to civilization in record time. At a local diner, she shared her story with a grizzled outfitter who'd lived near the Boundary Waters for decades. His face paled as he listened. He said the lake was known to old-timers as Mirrors, and a place avoided by locals. He recounted stories from his grandfather's time, tales of paddlers seeing faces in the water that weren't their own, or finding handprints on boats with no source. Some native Ojibwe elders called the lake a window to the other side, where spirits crossed over to watch the living. He warned Jenna not to share her photos, saying, "What you saw doesn't like being seen." Jenna posted her story on Reddit anyway, along with the chilling photo of the figure on the water. The post went viral, with kayakers and campers debating whether it was a prank, a hallucination from exhaustion, or something paranormal. Some shared similar experiences from the Boundary Waters' strange reflections, unexplained handprints, or loons going silent at night. One user, claiming to be a park ranger, said certain lakes were quietly flagged as sensitive due to repeated reports of odd sightings. Though they offered no details, Jenna hasn't returned to the Boundary Waters since. In a follow-up comment, she wrote that the handprints on her kayak faded within days, but her camera's memory card corrupted, wiping all but the one photo she'd uploaded. She still sees that smiling face in her dreams, its eyes too wide, its mouth too eager. "I don't know what it wanted," she wrote, "but it felt like it knew me. And I think it's still out there, waiting on that lake." Sixth story, The Footsteps at Midnight in the summer of 2023. A Reddit user named Alex, posting under the handle Rocky Trekker, shared a story that sent shivers through the backpacking community. It was a haunting account of a group camping trip in the Rocky Mountains of Colorado, a place known for its towering peaks and vast wilderness. Alex's tale, pieced together from his original post and the eerie details he added in follow-up comments, describes a series of unsettling nights that left him and his friends questioning what Torhu was out there with them. This is the story of the footsteps that stalked their camp and the chilling discovery they made on their final day. Alex was part of a group of 5 friends himself: Rachel, Sam, Tara, and Ben, who loved challenging themselves with multi-day backpacking trips. They'd planned a 4-day trek through a remote section of Rocky Mountain National Park, aiming for a high-altitude valley near Long's Peak. The route was rugged, winding through dense pine forests, alpine meadows, and rocky scree fields. Far from the park's crowded trails, they were well equipped with tents, sleeping bags, a portable stove, and a GPS tracker, ready for an adventure under the stars. The first day was exhilarating. They hiked 10 miles, marveling at snow-capped peaks and the crisp mountain air, and set up camp in a sheltered clearing surrounded by towering pines. The first night was peaceful, with the group sharing stories around a small campfire, the sky ablaze with stars. But on the second night, around midnight, Alex woke to a sound that made his heart skip: heavy footsteps crunching in the pine needles outside their tents. The steps were slow and deliberate, circling the campsite, never speeding up or slowing down. He lay still, listening, hoping it was an animal, a deer or elk, maybe. But the footsteps were too rhythmic, too heavy, like boots on the forest floor. He whispered to Rachel in the next tent, who was already awake, her eyes wide. "You hear that?" she hissed. The others stirred, and soon all 5 were listening, frozen in their sleeping bags. As the footsteps continued for nearly an hour before fading into the night, no one slept much after that. In the morning, they scoured the clearing for tracks, but found nothing: no hoofprints, no paw marks, just undisturbed pine needles and dirt. They debated leaving, but decided to stick to their plan, convincing themselves it was just a curious animal. The third night, the footsteps returned, closer this time, circling just beyond the glow of their fire. Sam, the boldest of the group, grabbed a flashlight and shouted, "Who's out there?" The beam swept across the trees, revealing nothing but shadows. The footsteps stopped abruptly, but the silence that followed felt heavier, like the air itself was holding its breath. Tara swore she saw a shape move between the pines, tall and upright, but it was gone before anyone else could look. By the 4th night, the group was on edge, their nerves frayed from lack of sleep and the constant feeling of being watched. They decided to keep the fire going all night, taking turns on watch. Around 2 a.m., Ben, who was on duty, whispered urgently for the others to wake up. The footsteps were back, louder and more deliberate, circling closer than ever. This time, they sounded like they were just outside the tents, crunching over rocks and snapping twigs. Rachel clutched her bear spray, while Alex gripped a camping knife, though he wasn't sure it would help. The group huddled together, shining their flashlights in every direction, but the beams caught nothing: no eyes, no movement, just the endless wall of trees. The footsteps paused right behind Alex's tent, so close he could hear a faint, rasping breath. Then, silence. They didn't hear another sound for the rest of the night. At first light, the group packed up, eager to leave the valley. As they broke camp, Sam noticed something that stopped them cold: a single, massive boot print pressed into a flat rock near the fire pit. It was impossibly deep, like it had been carved into the stone, and far larger than any of their boots, nearly 18 inches long, with a tread pattern none of them recognized. The print was alone, with no other tracks leading to or from it, as if something had stood there and vanished. Alex took a photo with his phone, his hands shaking, and the group hiked out in silence, the weight of the discovery pressing on them. Back in town, they stopped at a ranger station to report the incident. Showing the photo to a ranger named Mike, his face grew serious as he studied the image. "You found this up near Long's Peak?" he asked, his voice low. When they nodded, he sighed. "We get stories like this sometimes. Footsteps, no tracks, things that don't add up." He wouldn't elaborate, but mentioned old tales from the Ute people, who spoke of mountain shadows, spirits that walked the Rockies, following travelers, but never fully revealing themselves. He advised them to keep the photo private, saying, "Some things up there don't like being noticed." Alex posted the story on Reddit anyway, along with the photo of the boot print. The post exploded, with hundreds of comments from hikers and locals. Some suggested it was a prank or a bear with an odd gait, but others shared similar experiences: footsteps in the night, no tracks in the morning, or strange shapes in the Rockies' shadows. One user, claiming to be a former park employee, said certain valleys were avoided by rangers after dark due to unexplained activity logged since the park's founding. They didn't offer proof, but their word stuck with Alex. The group hasn't returned to the Rockies since. In a follow-up post, Alex wrote that the photo of the boot print vanished from his phone a month later. Though he'd saved it to a hard drive, he still hears footsteps in his dreams sometimes, heavy and deliberate, circling just out of sight. "Whatever it was," he wrote, "it wasn't an animal. It knew we were there, and I think it was playing with us." Seventh story: the abandoned cabin in the fall of 2024. A Reddit user named Lucas, posting under the handle Trail Ghost Hunter, shared a story that sent chills through the hiking community. It was a haunting account of a solo trek in Oregon's CS National Forest, a dense, misty wilderness known for its towering Douglas firs and rugged coastline. Lucas's tale, pieced together from his original post and the eerie details he added in follow-up comments, describes an encounter with a cabin that shouldn't have existed, and the unsettling laughter that followed him out of the woods. This is the story of the abandoned cabin that appeared from nowhere, and the mystery it left behind. Lucas was an experienced hiker, the kind who preferred solitude over company, finding peace in the quiet of Oregon's backcountry. He'd explored the Siasla before, but this trip was different. A 3-day loop through a remote section near the Drift Creek Wilderness, far from the usual trails. Armed with a lightweight backpack, a map, a compass, and a DSLR camera for capturing the forest's beauty, he set out in early October, when the air was crisp and the fog hung low among the trees. His plan was simple: hike 12 miles a day, camp in clearings, and avoid the crowds. He told a friend his route, a habit for safety, and headed into the forest under a gray, overcast sky. The first day was uneventful, the trail winding through fern-covered gullies and past streams swollen with recent rain. The forest was quiet, save for the drip of water from leaves and the occasional caw of a crow. By late afternoon, as the light faded and the fog thickened, Lucas began looking for a spot to camp. That's when he stumbled across it. A small, weathered cabin tucked in a clearing, half hidden by moss and vines. Its wooden walls were gray with age, the windows cracked and clouded, and the roof sagged under a blanket of pine needles. It looked abandoned, like it hadn't been touched in decades, but something felt off. Lucas had studied maps of the area, and no cabin was marked here. Curious, he approached, figuring it might be an old logging outpost or hunter's shelter. The door creaked open with a push, revealing a dusty interior lit by slivers of light through the broken windows. Inside, Lucas found a rickety table, a rusted stove, and a single chair, all covered in cobwebs. But what stopped him cold was the table. On it sat a plate of fresh bread, a bowl of steaming soup, and a lit oil lamp, its flame flickering gently. The air smelled of warm food, not the musty decay he'd expected. His heart raced. This wasn't right. No one could have been here. The trail showed no signs of recent use, and the fog would have hidden any smoke from the stove. He called out, "Hello? Anyone here?" But only silence answered. He snapped a few photos with his DSLR, the flash illuminating the room's eerie stillness, and backed out, deciding to camp elsewhere, as Lucas set up his tent a half-mile away. The fog grew denser, swallowing the forest in a gray haze. He built a small fire, trying to shake the unease, but the image of the cabin lingered. Around 11 p.m., as he sat by the fire, he heard it, laughter, soft and melodic, coming from the direction of the cabin. It wasn't a single voice but a chorus, like children giggling, though it carried an unnatural edge that made his skin crawl. He grabbed his flashlight, sweeping the beam through the trees, but the fog was too thick to see beyond a few feet. The laughter grew louder, then stopped abruptly, replaced by a faint rustling, like footsteps moving through the underbrush. Lucas doused his fire and retreated to his tent, clutching his knife, listening as the rustling circled his camp before, fading into the night. The next morning, Lucas retraced his steps, determined to find the cabin again. He followed his compass and the landmarks he'd noted: a twisted oak, a split boulder, but when he reached the clearing, it was empty. No cabin, no foundation, just a flat expanse of ferns and moss, undisturbed by any sign of human presence. His photos from the night before were still on his camera, showing the cabin's interior clear as day, the table, the soup, the lamp. But one photo chilled him to the bone. In the corner of the room, barely visible in the shadows, was a figure, a blurry shape with pale outstretched hands, as if reaching for the camera. He hadn't seen it when he took the shot. Shaken, Lucas hiked out, cutting his trip short. At a ranger station near Florence, he shared his story with a ranger named Ellen, showing her the photos. Her face paled as she scrolled through them. "You're sure this was near Drift Creek?" she asked. When Lucas nodded, she leaned in. "We hear stories like this sometimes, cabins that appear, then vanish. Locals call them ghost lodges." She mentioned old tales from the Silets tribe, who spoke of spirits in the forest that built false shelters to lure lost travelers, trapping their souls in the fog. She urged Lucas not to share the photos, saying, "Some things in these woods don't take kindly to being seen." Lucas posted his story on Reddit anyway, along with one photo of the cabin's interior, the figure faintly visible in the corner. The post went viral, with hikers debating whether it was a prank, a hallucination, or something supernatural. Some shared similar stories from the Siasala cabins that weren't on maps, laughter in the fog, or objects left behind that disappeared by morning. One user, claiming to be a retired ranger, said the forest had pockets where time and space felt wrong, tied to unexplained disappearances in the 1970s. They warned Lucas to delete the post, but he kept it up. Lucas hasn't returned to the Siasala since. In a follow-up comment, he wrote that the photos on his camera began to corrupt, pixelating into static, though the one he'd uploaded online remained intact. He still hears that laughter in his dreams, soft and childlike, echoing through a fog that never lifts. "I don't know what that cabin was," he wrote, "but it wasn't empty, and I think it wanted me to stay." 8th story, The Eyes in the Fog. In January 2025, a Reddit user named Caleb, posting under the handle Mainehunter87, shared a story that sent a chill through the outdoor community. It was a gripping account of a solo hunting trip in the dense forests of Maine's Allagash wilderness, a remote region known for its rugged terrain and eerie quiet. Caleb's tale, compiled from his original post and the unsettling details he added in follow-up comments, describes an encounter with something in the fog that defied explanation. This is the story of the glowing eyes that followed him through the mist, and the haunting mark left on his truck. Caleb was a seasoned hunter, raised in Maine's backwoods, where he'd tracked deer and moose since he was a kid. The Allagash, with its endless pines and frozen rivers, was his favorite hunting ground, a place where he felt at home despite its isolation. In late January, with snow blanketing the ground and temperatures dipping below zero, he planned a weekend trip to bag a deer. He packed his rifle, a thermos of coffee, a GPS, and a small tent. Driving his old pickup to a trailhead 20 miles from the nearest town, he parked, slung his gear over his shoulder, and hiked 5 miles into the wilderness, setting up a base camp near a frozen stream. The air was sharp, smelling of pine and ice, and the forest was silent, save for the crunch of his boots in the snow. On the first morning, Caleb set out at dawn, tracking deer signs through a low valley. By noon, a thick fog rolled in, a common occurrence in the Allagash, but heavier than usual, reducing visibility to barely 30 feet. He moved carefully, his rifle at the ready, following faint hoofprints in the snow. That's when he saw them. 2 glowing eyes, high in the fog, maybe 8 feet off the ground, too tall for any animal he knew. They were a pale, sickly yellow, unblinking, and they seemed to float, unattached to any body. Caleb froze, his breath clouding in the cold, watching as the eyes stared back, unwavering. He called out, "Who's there?" But his voice was swallowed by the mist. The eyes didn't move, but he felt their gaze, heavy and deliberate, like they were sizing him up. Caleb backed away slowly, keeping his rifle raised, but the eyes followed, gliding through the fog, always staying just out of clear sight. He quickened his pace, heart pounding, as the fog seemed to thicken around him, muffling the world. For nearly 2 hours, the eyes trailed him, appearing and vanishing in the mist, sometimes closer, sometimes farther, but always there. He tried to rationalize it may be an owl, a reflection, or his mind playing tricks, but no owl was that tall, and no reflection could move like that. The forest was dead silent, no birds, no wind, just the faint crunch of his boots and the weight of those eyes. By mid-afternoon, Caleb reached a clearing where the fog was thinner and the eyes vanished. Shaken, he decided to cut his trip short and head back to his truck. The hike back was tense, with every rustle in the trees making him jump. He kept his rifle ready, scanning the fog, but saw nothing. As dusk fell, he reached his truck, parked alone at the trailhead. He tossed his gear in the back, eager to leave, but something made him pause. He shone his flashlight around the truck, checking for damage or animals. That's when he saw it, a single, child-sized handprint on the driver's side door, pressed into the frost. The fingers were too long, too thin, and the palm was oddly narrow, like it wasn't quite human. There were no other prints, no footprints in the snow, no smudges on the truck, just that one mark. Clear as day, Caleb snapped a photo with his phone, his hands trembling, and drove to the nearest town, a small logging outpost called Fort Kent. At a diner, he showed the photo to a local bartender, an older woman named Ruth, who'd lived in the Allagash her whole life. Her face tightened as she studied the handprint. "You saw the eyes, didn't you?" she asked, her voice low. Caleb nodded, describing the glowing orbs in the fog. Ruth leaned in, her eyes darting to the door. "Folks around here call 'em the Watchers. Been stories for generations' eyes, in the mist, following hunters, leaving marks." She mentioned old Abenaki tales of spirits that roamed the Allagash, guarding the forest and testing those who entered. "They don't hurt you," she said, "but they don't let you forget they're there." Caleb posted his story on Reddit, along with the photo of the handprint. The post blew up, with hundreds of comments from hunters and locals. Some suggested it was a prank or an animal's paw, but others shared similar experiences: glowing eyes in the Allagash fog, strange marks on vehicles, or a feeling of being watched that lingered for weeks. One user, claiming to be a retired game warden, said certain parts of the wilderness were avoided during heavy fog due to sightings logged since the 1950s. They warned Caleb to sage his truck and avoid the area, saying, "The watchers don't like being followed back." Caleb hasn't hunted alone since. In a follow-up comment, he wrote that the handprint on his truck faded within days, but the photo remained, a haunting reminder. He still sees those glowing eyes in his dreams, floating in a fog that never clears. "I don't know what they were," he wrote, "but they weren't animals. They were watching me, and I think they wanted me to know it." Ninth story, the Silent Valley. In March 2025, a Reddit user named Mia, posting under the handle Desert Drifter, shared a story that sent shudders through the hiking community. It was a chilling account of a solo backpacking trip in the desolate expanse of Nevada's Great Basin National Park, a remote desert wilderness known for its stark beauty and eerie silence. Mia's tale, pieced together from her original post and the unsettling details she added in follow-up comments, describes an encounter in a valley that seemed to swallow sound and left her with a mark she can't explain. This is the story of the Silent Valley, where something unseen left its trace. Mia was an avid solo hiker, drawn to the solitude of the desert, where the vastness made her feel both free and insignificant. She'd tackled trails across the Southwest, but the Great Basin, with its rugged mountains and lonely valleys, called to her for its raw, untouched isolation. In early March, she planned a 3-day trek through a remote section of the park, far from the popular Wheeler Peak Trail. Armed with a lightweight pack, a topographic map, a satellite phone, and a journal to document her journey, she set out under a pale blue sky, telling only her roommate her route for safety. Her goal was to reach a hidden valley, rumored to have ancient petroglyphs, a tip she'd found in an obscure hiking forum. The first day was grueling but exhilarating. Mia hiked 14 miles through rocky canyons and sagebrush flats, the air dry and sharp with the scent of dust and creosote. The landscape was stark, with twisted juniper trees and distant peaks cutting jagged lines against the horizon. By late afternoon, she reached the valley, a wide, shallow basin ringed by low cliffs, its floor dotted with boulders and sparse vegetation. It was eerily quiet, the usual desert sounds: wind, birds, rustling lizards absent, as if the valley absorbed all noise. Mia set up her tent near a cluster of boulders, noting the silence in her journal. "It's like the air is holding its breath." As night fell, the temperature plummeted, and the stars burned bright in the moonless sky. Mia built a small fire, its crackle the only sound in the stillness. Around 10 p.m., she noticed something odd. Her fire's light didn't reach as far as it should, stopping abruptly a few feet from her tent, as if swallowed by the dark. She shone her flashlight into the valley, but the beams seemed to weaken, fading into a murky haze. Uneasy, she crawled into her tent, zipping it tight, and tried to sleep. That's when she heard it, or rather felt it. A low vibration, not quite sound, pulsing through the ground like a heartbeat. It was faint but rhythmic, making her sleeping bag hum against her skin. Mia sat up, heart racing, and listened. The vibration came in waves, steady and deliberate, seeming to emanate from the cliffs. She unzipped her tent, peering out, but saw nothing, just the boulders looming in the starlight. Then, she noticed movement, shadows shifting among the rocks, not cast by her fire, but moving independently, sliding across the ground like ink. They weren't human or animal, just vague, formless shapes that seemed to writhe. She whispered, "Hello," but her voice sounded muffled, as if the valley was eating her words. The shadows paused, then drifted closer, stopping just beyond. The fire's dim glow. Mia's flashlight flickered and died, though its batteries were fresh. Terrified, she stayed in her tent, clutching her satellite phone, but its screen was blank, refusing to power on. The vibration grew stronger, now accompanied by a faint hum, like distant voices chanting in unison. Mia's journal entry from that night, later shared online, read, It felt like the valley was alive, watching me. I don't know what those shadows were, but they knew I was here. The hum and shadows continued for hours, fading only as the first light of dawn crept over the cliffs. When Mia emerged, the valley was still, the air heavy, but silent once more. She packed up quickly, eager to leave, but as she dismantled her tent, she found something chilling, a series of marks scratched into the dirt around her campsite, forming a jagged circle. They weren't footprints or claw marks, but irregular lines, like symbols or runes, each about a foot long and etched deep into the hard-packed earth. Mia hadn't heard anything approach during the night, and the dirt showed no other disturbances. She took photos with her phone, now working again, and noticed her journal had new marks, too faint, smudged lines on the pages, like fingerprints made of ash, though she'd kept it zipped in her pack. Mia hiked out, her nerves frayed, checking over her shoulder every few steps. The valley remained silent, but she felt eyes on her back until she reached the trailhead. At a ranger station near Baker, she showed the photos to a ranger named Tom, a weathered man with a skeptical squint. His expression changed when he saw the symbols. "You were in that valley?" he asked, voice low. Mia nodded, describing the vibrations, shadows, and marks. Tom sighed. "We don't talk about that place much. Locals call it the Silent Valley. Paiute stories say it's a place where the earth speaks, but not to us." He mentioned reports of hikers hearing hums or seeing shapes in that area, and some finding strange marks near their camps. Best not to go back, he warned, refusing to look at the photos again. Mia posted her story on Reddit, along with a photo of the symbols around her tent. The post gained traction, with desert hikers debating whether it was a geological phenomenon, a hallucination from dehydration, or something paranormal. Some shared similar experiences from the Great Basin, unnatural silence, flickering lights, or marks that appeared overnight. One user, claiming to be an archaeologist, said the symbols resembled ancient petroglyphs, but weren't in any known catalog, hinting at a forbidden site the park didn't acknowledge. They urged Mia to delete the post, warning that some places don't like being shared. Mia hasn't returned to the Great Basin since. In a follow-up comment, she wrote that the photos on her phone began to distort, the symbols blurring into static, though the ones she'd uploaded remained clear. She still feels that vibration in her dreams, a low pulse that seems to call her back. "I don't know what was in that valley," she wrote, "but it wasn't empty. It was alive, and it left its mark on me."